just moved the 1970 911 back here into the shop. We're just gonna get started on it. Kind of wanted to give a brief overview of the car, all the parts that we have stacked for it. This car, we started on this years back. The car was in super rough shape when we got it. Had to do a ton of metal work. There was no rear quarters, rocker panels are missing, front end damage in the rear. This whole lower window channel that was missing from here all the way up to here. No parcel shelf. So there was a ton of metal work that had to be done. We got a Roth Sport 3.8 liter. It's gonna have Motec on it. I think it's supposed to make like around 400 wheel. It's gonna be paired up with this 915 trans. Over here on this table, we have a whole slew of Elephant Racing parts. They're front and rear coilovers. Front coilovers are pretty cool. Double steering knuckle setup, adjustable bump steer. The spindle height has been raised. We have their whole GT3 front crossmember kit. Utilizes their 997 GT3 front control arms. That should make a huge difference. These adjustable rear spring plates, adjustable camber plates for up front, front and rear Terra adjustable sway bars and end links. We have a whole Brembo big brake kit we're going to be putting on there. So this is kind of where we're going to start on this car. I'm going to start on all the suspension, make this car a roller first. After that, probably sort through all the wiring, get wiring, cables, ducting, all that stuff set up in the car. Probably the only original piece of suspension that we're going to use are these rear trailing arms. So we're going to probably start with these, blow these all apart, get these blasted, powder coated. Prior to that, we're gonna do the RSR reinforcement. With this all out of the way, you go and reinforce around this rear part of the hub. So we'll weld that in, get it all powder coated, do brand new bushings. I think we're just gonna do replacement rubber bushings. They do make monoball conversion kits for these. I'm unsure which one we're gonna use so far. There's gonna be a decent amount of little stuff that we're gonna refurbish. Like I was talking about, those rear trailing arms, and then we have full steering rack. These will get swapped out with new Elephant tie rods. Probably go through, rebuild that whole thing. This whole steering column, new knuckles on all of that, refinish everything on it. This is just what came with the car. Yeah, like I said, plans to make it a roller first, and then start sorting through all the wiring, getting the dash in, gauges, get the drivetrain in, go from there. All right, I'm gonna take apart these rear trailing arms. I wanna tackle this job first just so I can do fabrication that we need to, send it out to powder coat, and have that done and out of the way so we can assemble all the rest of the suspension. I'm gonna blow all this old stuff apart, and then we're gonna do the RSR style reinforcements. It's gonna be essentially a plate, but it's gonna come up around this whole thing to better reinforce this outer hub area. Gotta get that welded in, send it out, get powder coated, do new trailing arm bushings, new bearings, seals, and then that big brake kit that we have for it. So, let's get this thing apart.
You're weak, bro.
Yeah, I know. Didn't eat my Wheaties this morning. A little crusty. Okay, so you obviously saw me hammering on that thing. I didn't really have a good way to put this in the press to be able to press that outer hub out. Normally it's a press fit, but it should pop out fairly easy. Anyways, I got that thing all apart. The outside of that bearing is like seized on here. So now I'm gonna try and make some cuts real carefully, just so I don't cut into this at all, and try and chisel that off. we go. Yeah, that thing was on there pretty good. We'll get this all cleaned up, new bearings on it. Should be good to go. Yeah, you can see the other half of that bearing just floating in there. I wasn't really concerned about saving these at all. We were gonna be pressing those out and doing new bearings anyways, just to have this complete fresh setup. Like I said, we're gonna get all new shoes, adjusters, springs, all that stuff, but I'm gonna bag and save all this anyways. All right, this guy's on here pretty good. I'll grab a rubber mallet and just tap this off. Woo! This is the part that we're gonna reinforce this whole structure. We're gonna kind of build out a plate, like a reinforcement loop that comes around, just so this isn't the only thing hanging off the end of the arm. I'm gonna get these bearings and bushings pressed out. I just grabbed this solid die. We have a handful of them over there. I'm gonna put that in there in our press and get that bearing pressed out now. Hopefully, if it goes smooth. Oh yeah. There we go. So these guys, let me grab the new ones real quick. That didn't do anything. Make sure you have a sharp knife. Sharpen your Benchmade. Jeez. These bushings are a two-piece, so they get pressed in from both sides. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to go about popping out each side. Well, before I sand it, gonna wire wheel this surface real quick. Get some of the dirt and surface rust off. I'm just gonna tape off the bore for those bearings, just so I don't get anything in there. Probably not gonna blast too close to it, but I just would rather be safe. Now we got this thing taped off. I'm gonna throw this in the blast cabinet real quick and just blast off some of this like paint and surface rust and whatnot before I weld in reinforcements. It's probably gonna get re-blasted anyways before it gets powder coated, but this will make my life a little bit easier. But I can barely see it.
You need to tighten it, so you gotta...
Oh my lord. One of our ding-dongs who we hired to install this didn't tighten the stuff. God damn it, dude. All right, now that we have these blasted, cleaned up a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and reinforce them. So the RSRs, they had a gusset or reinforcement on the outside that ties this whole arm together. This is just a rough little mock-up piece to get an idea, but it'll essentially go like that. But yeah, make some better templates, cut them out of metal. We'll show them getting welded on, and then we're gonna send these out to get powder coated. And then we'll press in new bearings here, new bushings on the end, and she'll be dialed. All right, this is just rust piece. I'm gonna kind of shape it now to fit, but essentially it'll loop around like that. All right, so we have these reinforcements all welded in now. I made it out of a few different pieces. Here's some of the templates. The guy just kind of went there and that, like so. This one on the back side there, I dropped in. Then I formed that just to go around that opening there, so there's clearance. But yeah, as you can see now, this outer hub isn't kind of just like hanging onto the outside. It's gusseted and reinforced back into there, just so there's a little more structure. So yeah, those are all done, welded up. We're going to send these trailing arms off to get powder coated. And then when we get them back, we'll press in new bearings, new bushings there, get them back up on the car, and Then at that point, we can put on the new rear coilovers, spring plates, sway bar, and all of that. All right, this will be a little more in depth. So I went through a bunch of the steering components and took them apart just to go through and see what parts we need to replace or clean up, repair. So first thing I had was the steering rack. These are the old tie rods on it. We're upgrading to Elephant's turbo tie rod kit. So these guys, they're worn out anyways. The ball joints are super bad. I mean, you can see that. So took those out, put the rack in our parts cleaner, cleaned off all the years of grease and dirt and grime. I took apart the top cap here. There's some bearings and springs in there just to check it out. Everything else on here felt tight. There's this lower rubber coupler, which tends to go bad sometimes. This thing looks like it was probably replaced pretty recently. It's still in good shape. Anyways, this is all cleaned up. I'm gonna re-grease the splines on the shaft here, and there are some new grease. Put that back up in the car. Well, I had that all apart. I took apart the whole steering column. So there's this lower bearing that goes on the shaft here. This guy, there's I'm kind of seeing there's needle bearings in there. This gets worn over time too. It didn't feel horrible, but while we're in there, we're just gonna replace it with I believe one of Renline's upgraded bearings. So there's that guy. This is the shaft for the steering wheel itself that goes down to the rest of the steering column. This guy has two bearings inside. Both of these bearings are pretty shot just from sitting around and getting sandblasted. I mean, I can't even turn that by hand. Same with here, it's super crusty. So while we have that apart, we're gonna blast this, get it powder coated black to match everything else, do new bearings. This shaft is still good, so we'll clean this up and reuse it. The intermediate shaft here and these U-joints, we're just gonna replace these with brand new U-joints so they're nice and clean. While I took it apart, I noticed this intermediate shaft was bent also. I don't know if you can pick that up. Might be kind of hard to tell. Anyways, it's bent. We're gonna replace all of that. There's two factory shear bolts that go through the column here up into the body of the car. It's kind of hard to get those off sometimes. The previous person cut through here to get those bolts out. So I went back and cleaned that up, re-welded that. We'll get new bolts for it, get that up in place. Yeah, we're waiting for the tie rod kit to come in with new boots. So like I said, I'll grease the rack up. We'll throw those tie rods in after the fact. That's not a big deal. I'm gonna go ahead and get the steering rack assembled and on the new Elephant subframe in the car, and then probably continue with the whole rest of the suspension over here. Like I said before, we have the GT3 style control arms, and then we'll do coilovers, sway bar, and links, and front should be good to go. One other thing, so let me grab this. I believe it's, yeah, this box has all of our new bearings and seals. Sorry, I got sidetracked, but yeah, these are the other things for the front end that need to get rebuilt and gone through. We just have these bare hubs here. So gonna do new races, bearings, seals, studs, dust caps, all of that, get that assembled. And then these guys, yeah, once I have that and the coilovers on, we'll get those all installed. And then after that, move on to the brakes. All right, now that we have these all cleaned up, they were pretty nasty before. I'm gonna go ahead with a punch and press out these races. I have the new races in the freezer right now. And then we'll get the new ones pressed in, pack grease in and new bearings, get the bearings in, and then the inner seals, press those in as well, and get those on the spindles. before we go ahead and put the steering rack back on the car, I'm gonna go ahead and re-grease all the splines and the shafts here. I'll probably do it a couple times. I'm just gonna cycle the steering through. I'll hit the other side. All right, this is our new Elephant front subframe that we'd mentioned before. I'm gonna go ahead and just get the steering rack mounted to that first, and then we'll put the whole unit into the car. I just tightened it for now. Everything suspension-wise for now on the car, I'll assemble. I'm gonna go back through after, later down the road and torque everything. So if you don't see me with a torque wrench right now, that's why. We talked about it before. There's a lower bearing support. You can see right there. That's where it will go. We're still just waiting on that, but I'll pop that in after. These are from Elephant Racing also. These are their GT3 front control arms. They're based off the 997 GT3 platform. Pretty cool. I'm excited to check these out on here. Another thing to point out, so we added these sway bar reinforcement plates here. You can see where it's kind of bead rolled up around there. Those are welded in place just to make this section where the sway bar attaches a little bit stronger. This is Terret Engineering front sway bar kit, but we have their these sway bar blocks, and then their drop links as well. These are for a stiffness adjustment, if you're not aware. So the closer to the sway bar in this notch, this is gonna be the stiffest setting. This is gonna be the softest setting. I'm just gonna kind of throw it in the center for now. And then later on down the road, we can adjust it depending on driving style. Last thing we did was put on the coilovers themselves and the lower control arms and stuff. I just wanted to test fit these wheel hubs, make sure that they were good to go. So there's earlier and later year wheel lock nut. This spindle uses later style, it's slightly bigger. The opening on the later model wheel hubs are a little bit bigger. This will clear fine. It just it clears fine there. It just barely tags. So I'm gonna go through and just kind of chamfer the edges of this nut so there's clearance there. That'll be totally fine. Before we put those wheel hubs on though, I'm gonna get the brake set up. The brake rotors themselves bolt to the back side of the wheel hub itself. So that needs to all go on as one piece. I can't put it on after. These are the Brembos that we're gonna be doing. I have all new hardware. So I'm gonna bolt these hats to the wheel hubs themselves. New hardware, red Loctite, get them torqued down, and then we can put this whole assembly back on the spindles. I'm just gonna get a couple of these on here just to hold it in place real quick. All right, now that I got these started, these guys get torqued to 17 to 18 foot-pounds, and then we'll put them on the spindle and set the bearings. The only parts that come really close are just these edges here. So I'm just gonna take a tiny bit. Like I said, right now they clear, but I just want to be safe. Outer bearing, and then the thrust washer, and then that outer nut. These so these front hubs, they don't get torqued down tight at all. I'll tighten it up just to set the bearings and make sure that they're good to go on the spindle, but kind of a good rule of thumb on these ones at least, not all wheel bearings. That thrust washer, once I tighten it, I'll back it back off and just snug this up to the point where I can just barely move that thrust washer. That way there's not a lot of tension on there. For right now, I'm just gonna leave it like that and do the other side, and I'll come back and tighten everything back up, or tighten that lock bolt up on the nut. Yeah, so now you can see, it was just those corners, or it might be kind of hard to see. That bolt, it'll get recessed a little bit more, so it won't stick out as much once I tighten it, but you can see the corners here on the nuts. It clears just fine now. Another thing too, these hubs should spin pretty freely like that. If it's not, that thing's too tight on there. So check that. All right, those are all good to go. Oh, we just got our new turbo tie rods over here. We just got these guys. We also just got these trailing arms back from powder coat. Trailing arms, those are just powder coated. The steering column housing, intermediate shaft, and then this is the shaft for the steering column and the housing. Dust caps, those are a little hammered. We ordered new ones, so we're probably gonna replace those, but I have those for the meantime I can throw on there. So we got the turbo tie rod kit. We're using these bump steer corrector outer tie rod ends. And then we also have Elephant's tire rub kit. So these are gonna go on the inside of the tie rods to the rack. Those just kind of limit, I guess, he's been running bigger wheels and tires, obviously, especially to clear those brakes. These spacers will just essentially limit the steering just so that we're not dealing with tires rubbing the inner wheel well at the back. All right, these are, they call them tire rub kit. So they just slip over the steering rack like that, and then the tie rod will go right through there. It just limits it from how far it can go in, just by a hair. So I'm gonna grab the tie rods. These turbo tie rods, they have just a single joint here. The stock tie rods, there's a little piece that threads into the rack, and there's a rubber bushing. So those kind of get a lot of flex and get worn out after time. So these are a good upgrade. I'm just gonna attach the tie rods to the outer tie rod. We have this bump steer correction kit. Comes with these 4 spacers. So you can swap them around depending on the angle and your height if you want to mess with bump steer or correct it. So that's kind of cool. Later on down the road, once we get wheels and tires figured out, mounted on the car, and then figure out ride height, this is kind of all something that we'll go back to. We'll probably end up changing this and getting all the suspension set up. For now, it's just in place, but this is just kind of temporary. Now with all this stuff in here, we're gonna put the front calipers on. So these are the adapter brackets that came from Brembo. I'm gonna put those on first. I'll probably have these calipers off again, but I just want them in place so that I know where clearance and everything is. All right, now that we have this front end portion done, so if there's anything on this car that you guys want to see in the future, let us know. We'll try and touch base on that. But yeah, thanks you guys for watching. If you want to support us, give us a like or subscribe. Are you rolling right now?
Huh?
Are you rolling right now?